Welcome back. Good Wednesday morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Wednesday, April 15th, tax day. It is 7:03 on the East Coast. We are coming to you live this morning from our nation's capital in Washington all morning long. We kick the hour off with a hot topic of the hour. And, of course, the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports is still underway. President Trump telling me in my exclusive interview at the White House yesterday he thinks the conflict with Iran is close to over. He also told me about a letter that he sent to Xi Jinping asking Xi not to send weapons to Iran. He told me that Xi Jinping wrote back to him denying that China is sending weapons. Now, yesterday, the U.S. ambassador to China was also at the White House. We'll get into all of that. Plus, we are getting into the president's expectations about Kevin Warsh getting confirmed after his hearing next week. Here's the president with me yesterday. China wants to beat us on so much, you know that.
Of course, and we want to beat them. And we want to beat them, too.
To AI. I want to ask you about AI.
Maria. Yeah. But we want to beat them, too.
Will we beat them?
Well, we're leading in AI because of me. We're leading. You know why? I'm letting them build their own electric power plants. They're becoming a utility. I said to Mark Zuckerberg, congratulations, you're in the electric business. Because if I didn't do that, was my idea, actually. They're building these massive plants. And if they took it from the grid wouldn't be able to handle it. I said, no, if you want to build it, you have to build your own power. And then they will be giving excess power back into our grid. And these things are all under construction right now. So we're beating China on that. We're beating China on the economy. We have a great economy. Remember, if I didn't want to make that little journey to Iran, it was a journey. I said, we're going to have to do this for the good of the world.
So you still expect growth in the economy this year? No recession?
I mean, I do. Look, we had a couple of months where I had to go to a war. I had to go and fight either a military operation. Some people would call it a war. Some people call it a military operation. It was easy because we have the greatest military in the world. But I had to divert because if I didn't do that, right now you would have Iran with a nuclear weapon. And if they had a nuclear weapon, you would be calling everybody over there, sir. And you don't want to do that.
Well, you keep saying was. Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished. But we'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
That's pretty unprecedented. I mean, having direct talks like that.
I have talks with everybody, but it's very effective. I think you're going to have a great deal. I'm doing a great job for the country and for the world. You know, we've had no help, zero from NATO. We're there for them. They're not there for us. We spend, you saw the chart that came out a couple of days ago, with a big monster red ball, that was us, and all these little satellite balls, and it represented the money spent on military and NATO. And it's ridiculous. And they should have been better. They should have said, we'll send somebody. It's a small operation compared to a big operation. But NATO was not there for us. And what it means, if they're not there for us here, they're not going to be there for us. So why are we spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year on NATO if they're not going to be with us? If they're not going to be with us on Iran, they're not going to be with us on a much bigger subject than Iran.
Did you see that Britain suffered the biggest growth forecast downgrade in the G7?
Yeah, well.
So their economy is impacted.
It's the UK. I would say this. They got to stop with the windmills, and they got to open up the North Sea. They have the North Sea in Aberdeen, Scotland. It's the biggest, one of the most incredible oil fields anywhere in the world. It's got hundreds of years left. And you know what they do? They closed it because they want so much that the oil companies are begging them to go there. They called me, please speak to them. They made it impossible because of the environmentalists, the horrible environmentalists that hurt that country so badly. And they're going with the windmills, destroying their fields all over the place. They have that problem, and then they have the problem of immigration. What Europe has done with immigration, most of the countries, not all, what they've done with immigration is horrible.
Do we still have the same relationship with Italy right now and Giorgia Meloni?
No. She's been negative. Anybody that turned us down for helping with this Iran situation, we do not have the same relationship. Just so you know, Italy gets a lot of oil from the strait. You can call it the Strait of Hormuz or the Hormuz Strait. I said, which is better? They said, either is okay, but you can call it either one. The only thing you can't call it is the Trump Strait. They don't like that idea. By the way, speaking of that, I did a thing that people like very much, except for Mexico. I took the Gulf of Mexico, and we now call it the Gulf of America. That's not bad.
And Google changed it. I know that.
And Google.
But look, did you see
and by the way, Google was great on that.
Did you see Europe is now drafting a program and plan to open up the Hormuz Strait without the United States?
That's so sad. We're doing it now. By the way, it's opening. The ships are coming back and forth. Oh, without the United States. It just shows you, how can you have a country, how can you have a group of countries with that attitude? Look at Greenland. We should have Greenland to protect the world against Russia and China. The mention of it, all of a sudden they get, this country should not be paying trillions of dollars to NATO.
Mr. President, I got to ask you about AI. This is an important question, I think, for our audience. And we saw reports that Treasury Secretary Bessent and Chairman Jay Powell called an emergency meeting with the major banks because they said that there was a risk over the Anthropic model. And the worry is that bad actors are actually going to be able to hack into these banks and faster than institutions can actually respond. Do you see this as a systemic threat?
Not systemic. We'll work it out. AI is very important. Billions and even trillions of dollars is being invested in our country because of it. It's got some bad aspects. It's got mostly good aspects medically and so many other ways. You'll be finding cures to diseases that you would have never found before. There are a lot of good things, but we have to be careful with it. Like everything else, we have to be careful with it. But when you tell me Bessent, he's great. When you tell me about Jerome Too Late Powell, he's a disaster. Here's a man who took this little tiny building and a couple of other little tiny complex, and he's spending more than $3 billion. I want to know who the contractor is, because that contractor is making billions of dollars, perhaps. So he's doing a bad job. He should be lowering interest rates.
But do you think that Kevin Warsh is going to get confirmed next week?
I think so. I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
But, I mean, Tom Tillis is still blocking it.
Yeah, but Tom Tillis is an American. He knows what to do. I think let's see what happens.
Will you tell or at least advise Judge Jeanine to end that criminal probe into Jay Powell so that Tom Tillis...
Well, it's really more than that. It's more than a criminal probe. It's a criminal probe, I guess, but it's also a probe on incompetence. How do you take a little building? I built a hotel for $201 million that's bigger than that building, down the road. It's a little while ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I built the Trump Hotel, which I sold to Waldorf Astoria. It's a good deal. I built it like around $200 million in construction. They're going to spend maybe $4 billion. And you know what? I'm not sure the thing's ever going to open. You know, I do that stuff very well. I went past the site the other day. I was driving past. They said, take me past the Federal Reserve building. They took me past. There's very little work done inside. Kevin may never get to have the use of that building. And he told me something very interesting. He said, the saddest part of it is they ripped down the most beautiful building of them all. They ripped it down. He said they had boardrooms and various rooms in that building that were the most beautiful in Washington, and they ripped it down. What they've done to that. So it is probably corrupt, but what it really is incompetent. And we have to show the incompetence of that. And he headed the job. He was, you know, this guy, Jerome.
But you want Jay Powell out of the way. Isn't it the easiest way to get him out of the way to end the probe?
Does that mean we stop a probe of a building that I would have done for $25 million that's going to cost maybe $4 billion? Don't you think we have to find out what happened there? You know, we have other jobs like that, like the railroad in California, where it's, 25 times more than it was originally going to cost. And I think they're going to end up abandoning it. Okay, that's Gavin Newsom, or as I call him, Gavin Newsom, who's so bad. But that's the one. But I think the Federal Reserve building is just as bad. And so whether it's incompetence, corruption, or both, I think you have to find out. I really do. I think you have to find out.
So you're not going to drop the probe?
No, I'm not playing. I have to find out.
And he said he's not leaving if,
Well, then I'll have to fire him, okay? If he's not leaving on time, I've held back firing him. I've wanted to fire him, but I hate to be controversial, you know? I want to be uncontroversial, but
and you think Kevin Warsh can get confirmed? You think Tom Tillis is going to give you a vote?
Well, we're going to have to find out. He might not, but that's why Tom Tillis is no longer a senator.
Okay. On the AI
Tom
thing,
Tillis is no longer a senator, right?
Well, he's on his way out.
Well, no, he quit, but he quit. And I think he doesn't want the legacy of stopping a person who could be great. I think Kevin Warsh is going to be great. He doesn't want the legacy of having an incompetent guy stay there for longer than is necessary. I know Tom Tillis, he's a good man. I don't think he's going to hurt. I know he said what he said, and maybe it's true, in which case I'll have to live with it. But not as chairman. This guy is a bad chairman, really bad chairman. And I was surprised when Biden extended him, to be honest with you, but he did. Interest rates should be much lower than they are right now.
And you think they will go lower later this year?
When Kevin gets in, I do, yeah.
Just to close the loop on AI, Mr. President, in a worst-case scenario, could that be the kind of technology that undermines confidence in the banking system?
Yeah, probably, but it could also be the kind of technology that allows greatness in the banking system, makes it better and safer and more secure.
So should government have some safeguards? Should there be a kill switch for some of these AI agents?
There should be, but let me say, we're leading in AI. We're leading China by a lot, actually. We're building plants that nobody ever imagined before, and it's going to be a tremendous, bigger than the internet. It's going to be tremendous. And there are always difficulties when you're at this stage of something, but you know, when you mention banking, it can also make banking much bigger, much safer, much more efficient.
Let me just ask you about the midterms. Do you expect the Republicans to lose seats in the House, and what does that mean for your agenda?
Well, I just left with Mike Johnson and some great people, some great congressmen and women, and in the Oval Office. I think we're going to do good. Now, with that being said, when somebody gets elected president, that party always loses the midterms. I don't know why. I don't know why. Nobody could explain it. I asked people that are deep into the psychological world, I said, why is it that a voter votes for the opposite party? Even when you have a good president. I think I had the greatest year, the greatest opening year. I've read the greatest. Look, I ended 8 wars. A 9th is coming. But I ended 8 wars. Nobody's ever ended 1 war. Who's ended 1? Nobody. I ended 8. We have the biggest tax cuts ever. We have the biggest regulation cuts ever. The greatest economy ever, pretty much including the fact that I took a detour into Iran in order to stop something that could have destroyed the world, right? But even when you have a great president, they tend to lose the midterms. It doesn't make sense to me, so we're going to try turning it around. You know, in 50 years, I guess the president, the party with the president, has won twice. Why that happens, I don't know. We are really working hard to turn that around. We've had the greatest year in the history of the presidency, first year, and we should be giving credit. Look at the border. So we had a border that was an open civ. You covered it better than anybody.
So is that the message for voters going into the midterm elections? The border.
Yeah, I should get credit.
Leave them for?
Yeah, I think we should. Well, I think we have to bring it back to talk. We don't need help on the border. But, you know, I built over 1,000 miles of wall. We have to talk about it because we should be given credit for having taken this disaster where people were criminals were coming in from all over the world and pouring into our country. The worst thing, it's the worst thing that's ever happened. It was like an invasion. And we should be given, Maria, credit for it. So I'm going to be talking about it. But I'm also going to be talking about we gave the voters the biggest tax cut in history, the biggest regulation cuts in history, the best economy in history. And now what we're doing is we took this path, we knocked the hell out of Iran, we stopped them from having, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, regardless. By the way, I could leave tomorrow, they would never be able to have a nuclear weapon. For years, they would, because their country is devastated. They don't have a Navy, they don't have an Air Force, they don't have an airplane. They're all gone. And the press doesn't write about it. The New York Times, you think, if you read the New York Times, this fake, horrible newspaper, you would think they're doing well in the war. They have nothing left. They're going to make a deal. We'll see what happens. We have to explain to the voters, so importantly, the great job that we've done, because there's no reason why the Republicans should be losing. These people, they'll open up the borders again. They'll have transgender for everybody. They'll have men and women sports. They'll end no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security for our seniors. They'll end it all. And if people hear that, I don't see how we lose the election.
Final question on space, because Artemis 2, what a success. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you expect the United States will beat China in this race to the moon? And what do you want to say about the astronauts who circled the moon in Artemis 2? Where's that going?
So, number one, they were great. I spoke to them as they were circling, right? Just after they came out of that dark cavity. Great. They're great. I'm the one that started that program. NASA was closed. It's totally closed. There was grass growing on the runways. I went there. I was there in Florida, looked at, got pictures of all of their facilities. They had grass growing out of the cracked asphalt in Florida and elsewhere. And I said, you know what, this is terrible. Let's start it up. And we started it up, and it gave great pride. Everybody watched that the other night. It was really something. Everybody I know watch it. They watch the landing. They watch the takeoff. And it gives us pride, and something very good will come out of it. But, you know, from a military standpoint, it's very helpful. And one of my greatest achievements, I think, will be the fact that I started Space Force, because we were losing to Russia and China, and now we're way ahead of them.
And we're going to beat China to the moon.
I think so. Look, we already did many years ago. You know, maybe they'll get lucky. They'll send a ship up or something. You know, they tried yesterday to send a ship, but it wasn't very successful, to put it mildly. I think so. I don't like to put myself in that position. If they beat us, I'll say, oh, I said on Maria's show, you know, I don't really. But we're looking to we have a very good guy, Jared, who you know. He's doing a very good job as the head of NASA. Very proud of him. And I think we'll probably win, but I don't want to get into that, because if they win, I don't want you saying, oh, Trump was wrong. Trump was wrong. What a terrible thing. The fact is, we're way ahead in space. We're way ahead in the military. We have the greatest submarines in the world. We have the greatest military in the world. Nobody makes equipment like us, whether it's the Patriot or the Tomahawk. We have the best military equipment anywhere in the world. And we're going to keep it that way.
Mr. President, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.